The sun will come out tomorrow. You can bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. Well, that was harder to do than it was in the shower, but so is that maybe perhaps right now the most unbelievable thing I've ever said on a Sunday morning? The sun will come out tomorrow? Somewhere it'll come out. Yeah. Sometimes you go to the local news and figure maybe they're going to help you out to feel a bit better about the upcoming forecast. And on Thursday night, I will tell you, I was watching Channel 9, and I'm not going to hide that from you. I watch all 3 of them, but I don't watch all 20 of them, but I watch the 3 local ones. But at the end of the program, you know how like the anchor persons and the sports guy and the weather people, they all get together and they have that little final comment. So Tanya O'Rourke looks over at Steve Raleigh, the weatherman, and says, well, Steve, do you have any final word about the weather? He says, I don't think we'll ever see the sun again. Maybe. I wonder. And I want to confess to you, when it comes to weather, I have a very city boy attitude about weather. You know, whatever happens, that's what happens. And whatever happens, generally for me, it's some form of inconvenience. Too much rain, not enough rain. Too much sun, not enough sun. Too much snow. Never enough snow. But anyhow, for me, weather and rain is just something you have to deal with. Now, I've experienced what it means to see what rain can do. Down in New Orleans, spent a few times down there, and they pretty much, Hurricane Katrina pretty much lived out the formula that FEMA has. The Federal Emergency Management Association has a formula. And the formula says for every day underwater is a month of cleanup or a week of cleanup and a month of fix-up. The math on Hurricane Katrina, 11 months to clean up, 11 years to fix up. It pretty much hit right in exactly the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Another hurricane came to New Orleans over top of that. Used to not care much about the rain. I just figured I had to deal with it until I lived in a house that flooded 3 times. I remember, Deb will remember too. I can sleep through storms and rain, but when we were there, just the sound of rain immediately sent me down to the basement. And I'd grab a broom, and quite often that meant that I had to start sweeping. One night, it was on a Saturday night, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, having church the next day, and actually having Methodist Annual Conference later that day, my grandson TJ and I were in the basement from 3 till 6 in the morning, trying to keep the water from coming up. I have learned some things about weather-related prayer. When I went, being the city boy that I am, God sent me into ministry. In the first place I ended up in, it was a very agricultural area here in the state of Ohio called Darke County. And most of my members were farmers in one way or another. Some had large farms and some had farms and then also worked in the local town as well. And I arrived there in September, late September, and it was raining. And the next Sunday it was raining. And the Sunday after that it was raining. Sunday after that was raining. Like a city boy, I stood up in front of my congregation every Sunday and I said, God, we thank you for the rain which refreshes us and gives us joy and blah, 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 until Lee Conway stopped me after the service and said, if you don't quit praying for rain, I'm never going to get my crops out of the field. I learned and Lee taught me that day, the prayer is 1 inch in the morning, 1 inch in the evening, sun all day. Can you make that prayer happen? Well, I learned to pray for weather, and then I learned drastically to pray for weather because I was there during a drought. And it became pretty serious. I had a young man in my congregation who I loved dearly who lost his farm during the drought. So we do look at the weather, and the weather tells us some things, and perhaps tells us about some things to come. This morning, Steve shared with us with Isaiah. And Isaiah is in the desert. Not only in the desert physically, but the people that he had come to be a prophet to were in a desert spiritually. They were waiting for a Messiah to come. And in their waiting, Isaiah used an illustration using the desert in something they understood, but I wish that I could see sometime, to tell you the truth. Isaiah taught in the desert. In fact, in the desert is awful dry, isn't it? We've gone out to the desert Southwest, and I know some of you have been out to the desert Southwest with me and have been there. And I think, oh good, there's not going to be any rain. No rain. And then I learned what it was like to be dry all the time and have it affect my skin, my nose even. I needed to get back to the mold of Ohio. And dryness has its own set of values. So Isaiah reminds the people, because they had seen it in their life, as every once in a while a rain's going to come. And when it comes in the desert, all those seeds, all those bulbs, all those plantation that looks like there's nothingness, all of a sudden they hear the rain come and boom, the desert blooms. I've only seen pictures of it. But have you seen it? Yeah. No? Okay. You guys talk about that later, okay? But I've seen the pictures, and it's purple and blue and red and every color you can imagine, and it just all of a sudden, it bursts. Isaiah says to us, in the dryness of our life, in the waiting in our life, in the messiness of our life, that hang on, wait. There is going to be joy. It's going to be boom. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Steve shared with us also from Psalms this morning, and it says, happy are those who help is in the God of Jacob, who hope in the Lord. Now, we've talked about Jacob here a couple times. Jacob did not have it always easy. Where did Jacob's people end up? They ended up over in Egypt and became slaves, and they waited and waited and waited and waited for them. People of God knew a lot about waiting. But a response so many times is what? When? When is it going to happen? When? James says, as he writes, in his sermon, be patient. Be patient. James says this. He says, meanwhile, friends wait patiently for the master's arrival. You see farmers do this all the time, waiting for their valuable crops to mature, patiently letting the rain do its slow but sure work. Be patient like that. Stay steady and strong. The master could arrive at any time. Friends, don't complain about each other. A far greater complaint could be lodged against you. The judge is standing just around the corner. Take the old prophets like Isaiah as your mentors. They put up with anything, went through everything, and never once quit. All the time honoring God. What a gift of life is to those who stay the course. Those who stay the course. Farmers give us an example of waiting. Waiting. Of course, spending time as a city kid around farms and all that, I became mesmerized by what those folks really knew. I had a friend named Paul. Paul was a farmer. Paul said it was time to go out and fertilize, and my mind immediately went to, he's going to go out and throw some stuff on the field. What Paul meant by fertilizing is that he was going to go home and on his tractor was set up with global tracking systems, and a satellite was going to drive his tractor. He'll drive the tractor, but was going to drive the fertilization so that as he went across his land from the sky, from a satellite, the land, he could see, the satellite could see where each piece of land needed which fertilization. And then it was put on the land at that point. Good Lord. Good Lord. I didn't fathom that could happen. And then when it came time to plant, I thought when you plant, you just went out and got some kind of plow and just dropped seeds in the ground. Once again, global tracking systems guided the tractor to get the ultimate amount of rows of whatever crop it was, whether it was corn or soybeans or whatever, to get the maximum yield. And then at the end of the season and harvest time, if the preacher didn't pray that it rained all the time, they went out with their combines, and the machinery was so wonderful that we talk about reaping and people picking up in the fields the poor afterwards. Now the farmers shared their crops with the poor, but there was nothing hardly left after a combine went through because they were so efficient. See, farmers are so smart. They are so smart. They know so many things, so many scientific things and so on in order to be able to do their work. Any farmer worth his weight will tell you this too. Without God, nothing happens. Without God, nothing happens. They learn how to wait. You're invited to wait, and while you're waiting, meantime, work on yourself. Work on yourself. Talk to God. Spend some time with God instead of, have friendships and things like that, but don't spend time talking about others. In verse 9 of James 5, it says, friends, don't complain about each other. A far greater complaint could be lodged against you. The judge is standing just around the corner. Think about that. Think about that. Is the next time you decide to say, you know what? Let me tell you about so-and-so. You know what I'm talking about. That goes on around here sometimes. And put in your mind what James says here. The judge is standing just around the corner. Whatever you say, not only some other people are going to overhear, God's going to overhear it too. God's going to overhear it too. So, it's important for us to spend time talking to God. And wait. As you're waiting, ask God to strengthen you for the road that lies ahead for you. If you haven't caught on by now, I don't know much about agriculture and plants and things like that. But I read something recently that I found kind of interesting about this man that he wanted to have vegetables in the spring, and he wanted to get a head start on them. So down in his basement, he got the right lights, ultraviolet lights and things like that, and set up in basement and put little plant starts there in order for plants to grow that could be put in the ground as spring came. And what he did is he put a large fan blowing right on the plants. Someone asked him why. Why would you do that? Were the plants too hot or something? He said, no. I want them to get used to the wind so when they get out in the fields, they'll be strong. That's what God doesn't hand calamity to you, but when calamity is handed to you, when challenges are handed to you, when difficulties are handed to you, God will help to strengthen you in the midst of all that. Many ways we live in dryness. We live in difficulty. We live in challenges, but we are reminded and is what God is doing for us. No better way to be reminded of that than to join together in singing Joy to the World.